At her lavish birthday party, surrounded by friends and cameras, a woman publicly humiliates her partner by telling him to step out of the photo because he ruins the aesthetic. In that moment, he realizes their relationship was always about appearances, not love. Instead of reacting, he calmly leaves the party and drives away, understanding that the humiliation is actually his turning point,
It's all your
confirming a quiet
fault.
plan he's been preparing for months, one that will soon bring consequences she never expected. Have you ever had a moment so small, so quiet, that no one else noticed it, but you knew instantly it changed how you'd see everything afterward? That was me, standing at Vanessa's birthday party, the kind of night designed to look perfect in photos, where laughter is loud and happiness feels rehearsed. She was radiant in the center of the room, phone already raised as people crowded in, and I stood beside her without thinking, assuming closeness still meant something. Then someone joked that the frame would look better without extra clutter, and she laughed, too fast, and said, "Yeah, let's keep it clean," gently guiding me back with a casual touch that felt lighter than air and heavier than any argument we'd ever had. The camera flashed, cheers erupted, and I wasn't angry or shocked, I was clear. Clear in a way that doesn't announce itself. The way truth settles when it's been waiting patiently for you to catch up. She immediately turned the screen toward her friends, smiling as they approved the image, never once looking back to check where I'd gone or whether I'd followed. And that was the beat that felt different from all the others before it. This wasn't neglect disguised as stress or busyness or distraction. This was comfort in my absence. Around me, conversations resumed without missing a step, and I noticed how natural it was for everyone to accept the space I no longer occupied. How easily I blended into the edges of the room once I stopped insisting on being seen. I held my drink and didn't sip it, felt my jaw tighten and then relax, and told myself, like I always did, not to overreact, not to ruin the night, not to become a problem when I'd spent years being the solution. But something subtle shifted as I watched her laugh again, confident and unburdened, no longer needing me nearby to anchor her. I realized this wasn't the first time I'd stepped back. It was just the first time I noticed I hadn't been invited forward in a long while. I didn't announce my exit or look for closure in that moment. I slipped my phone into my pocket, nodded at someone who barely registered my name, and walked toward the door with a strange lightness in my chest, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. Outside, the air was cool and quiet, and sitting in my car with my hands resting on the wheel, I replayed that single gesture, the step back, the cropped frame, the easy laugh, and understood how many times I'd mirrored it emotionally, shrinking myself to preserve harmony, trusting that loyalty would eventually be returned. As I drove away, I didn't feel heartbreak or rage, just a calm awareness that whatever this relationship had become, it was no longer built with me at the center, and the most important part was this: Vanessa had no idea that anything had changed at all. She still believed the night had gone perfectly, still assumed I'd be there when she looked up again, and she had no reason to question that assumption yet. What she couldn't see, what no one inside that room could see, was that this quiet departure wasn't an escape or a protest. It was the first deliberate move in a shift she wouldn't notice until the consequences were already unfolding. At first, the changes were almost imperceptible, the kind of small, everyday moments that barely register until you look back and realize how much has shifted. I stopped stepping in to correct minor mistakes, letting small errors slide in her schedule, in emails she sent, even in client communications I usually proofread. She didn't notice. At the office, a meeting started 5 minutes late, and I let it happen. A presentation had a typo, and I didn't whisper the correction. Normally, I would have intervened immediately, smoothing over any imperfections before they caused visible issues. But this week, I withheld my usual support. Vanessa, as always, moved through her day with confidence, her voice crisp, her laughter bright, her gestures precise, an image of control, polished and unshakable. And yet, behind that perfection, the smallest cracks began to show. She muttered under her breath when a file wasn't where she expected it, tapped her pen a little longer on the desk than usual, paused to reread her own notes with a slight frown. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that would alarm anyone else, but to me, these were signals, tiny flickers revealing how dependent she had become on my invisible labor. I noticed the way she assumed I would automatically handle scheduling conflicts, how she left payments unverified, how she expected the house, the office, even our social life to function without missing a beat, and yet never paused to see who was quietly holding it all together. There was a strange satisfaction in observing this. Not malicious, but clarifying. The life she maintained for appearances was delicately balanced, and the invisible hand sustaining it belonged to someone she refused to fully acknowledge. At dinner, I let a minor argument with a caterer go unresolved. At a client call, I stayed silent when she misrepresented an invoice. Each moment was small, almost trivial, yet they accumulated into a quiet tension beneath her awareness. Her eyes flicked to me once or twice, briefly, as if sensing something off, but she quickly returned to her curated composure, unaware that her foundation had just shifted fractionally without her consent or notice. Friends and colleagues noticed nothing, but for me, each subtle omission, each withheld correction, was a beat in a growing rhythm. Invisibility had stopped feeling like loss and started feeling like leverage. By midweek, I saw patterns in her routine that I had never allowed myself to notice before, assumptions she made about my constant support, the automatic trust in my presence to prevent error, the reliance on me to maintain both practical and aesthetic perfection. She remained confident, poised, smiling, socializing, and posting her curated updates as if everything was seamless. Meanwhile, I catalogued the evidence in silence, the minor delays, the overlooked mistakes, the hesitations she never consciously acknowledged. No confrontation, no argument, just observation and patience, letting the system reveal its cracks on its own. And in those cracks, I recognized a truth I hadn't fully articulated until then: when someone depends on you invisibly, your presence becomes power, not obligation. And by stepping back strategically, I could create a space where clarity and control rested solely in my hands. The week closed with a sense of inevitability. She was thriving in her polished world, entirely unaware of the growing imbalance beneath it. And I, calmly present yet unobtrusive, had the first real insight into the gap between appearance and reality. The tension wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, almost cinematic in its subtlety, but it carried weight. Invisibility was no longer just about fading into the background. It was about understanding leverage, the slow, deliberate power of being seen and unseen, and the realization that the first move had already been made. The morning after the subtle chaos of the previous week, the office felt unervingly quiet, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the next disruption, and I moved through it with deliberate caution, noting each detail with the calm detachment of someone who had long since learned to measure rather than react. Emails awaited, some marked urgent, and as I scrolled through them, I saw the first cracks in Vanessa's carefully constructed facade: unpaid invoices, minor errors in her project reports, and abrupt cancellations from clients who were sensing tension beneath the polished surface she presented to the world. By mid-morning, her texts had begun, clipped, impatient, sometimes accusatory, each one a subtle test of control designed to provoke a response. And yet I remained still, letting the buzz of my phone punctuate the quiet as a reminder that the leverage had shifted and that my calm now contrasted sharply with her flailing energy. Around noon, a staff member approached with a question about a scheduling conflict she had caused, a small domino in a growing line, and I watched how minor disruptions compounded. Her assistant had accidentally double-booked meetings, a client demanded clarification on deliverables, and Vanessa herself had been unreachable for hours, absorbed in her own narrative of perfection and panic, completely unaware that her meticulous plans were unraveling in real time. Lunch brought another subtle disruption, a call from a vendor confused by a sudden change in specifications that Vanessa had insisted upon without informing anyone, leaving the office scrambling to adjust. I made no move, only observed the patterns forming, recognizing that her obsession with appearances, with maintaining control at all costs, had created a fragile structure that could not endure the smallest deviation. By mid-afternoon, the consequences became more tangible. A colleague mentioned a rumor circulating from her marketing circle, hinting at dissatisfaction with her management, while a client requested immediate reconciliation over a billing oversight she had ignored. And each micro-event, each small ripple, amplified the sense of inevitability that had been quietly building for months. Her phone buzzed constantly, her messages ranging from frantic reminders to thinly veiled threats. Yet I stayed composed, noting the way her energy shifted, how her hands trembled when she realized tasks had not been completed perfectly, how her voice carried a sharp edge even in short text notes. Each observation reinforced the truth I had long known: she equated control with power, and any challenge to that illusion triggered disproportionate reactions. By late afternoon, The cascading effect was undeniable: financial, professional, and social consequences collided in a perfect storm, each micro-crisis feeding the next, creating an accelerating domino effect that she could neither see nor stop. And I allowed myself a moment to lean back, acknowledging the precision with which the pattern was unfolding, each consequence both inevitable and fully deserved, a reflection of choices made over years. And as I watched the city lights shift through the office windows, I knew that this was only the beginning. Her perfect aesthetic, her curated reality, was cracking under the weight of its own fragility, and the next day promised further revelations, confrontations, and the first overt signs that the life she had built on appearances alone was about to collide with the truth in ways she could never anticipate. By the following week, the quiet leverage I had cultivated began to meet the first cracks of external reality, subtle at first but undeniable. At breakfast, I noticed Vanessa's eyes flicker with impatience as I poured coffee, the way she always did when her plans required a flawless script and I wasn't performing perfectly within it. She muttered something under her breath about the wrong sugar, and though it seemed trivial, it carried the weight of her ongoing dissatisfaction, the silent measure of control she believed she held. By mid-morning, I was at the office, reviewing documents, when my phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number. A terse message from one of her friends asking if I'd seen Vanessa. Apparently she had stormed out of a boutique meeting in tears, leaving her assistant bewildered and the client waiting. I didn't respond. The leverage I'd built wasn't shaken by a fleeting emotional flare, it was confirmation that her equilibrium relied on the illusion of perfection, not reality. Later, at lunch, I glanced at my email to find a short, clipped note from Vanessa herself: "We need to talk tonight. It's urgent." Her punctuation was sharp, her language economical, betraying frustration she could not disguise behind her curated persona. I read it twice, then set the phone aside, letting it buzz in the background, a reminder that her anxiety now rippled into my world in measurable ways. At dinner, I attended a networking event with a few clients, and through the low hum of conversation, I noticed her reflection in the glass, pacing outside on the terrace, shoulders tense, jaw tight, tiny micro moments betraying a storm she assumed I hadn't noticed. I watched her lips move in silent